Welcome to the Winners Find a Way show and podcast with your host, Trent M. Clark, 3-time World Series coach, CEO of Leadershipity, serial entrepreneur, having started 12 companies, coach to the 1%, and an international speaker. This show is going to be your go-to podcast for facing adversity, being inspired, and overcoming obstacles, all from the best in the world, business, sports, and leadership. Hate the crappy ingredients in many beverages and energy drinks? Rebellious Infusions are the go-to functional beverage. They have 5 or fewer plant-based organic ingredients, no sugar, no calories, loaded with antioxidants to boost your immune system, and L-theanine for brain health. Rebellious Infusions are available at drinkrebellious.com. Rethink your drink. For 10% off of your next purchase, use the code 99999.
Hello, welcome to Winners Find the Way show. I am your host, Trent Clark. I'm with my friend Carole. Let me say it right. Stizza?
Perfect.
Stizza. Wow. Woo. You know, like I always take a shot and then all of a sudden someone will say Stizza and they'll just jack it. And I didn't want to be that guy. So Carole, so excited to have you on today. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
Tell everybody where they can find you online.
I am on LinkedIn with my name, so feel free. And I also have a website, relevant-insight.com. And you can find Relevant Insight Coaching on Instagram and Facebook.
All right. So we're going to get some relevant insights today on the Winners Find a Way show. I am super excited to have Carole with me, and it is going to be awesome. For you out there, if it's the first time you've ever joined the show, if you're up against something, facing adversity, challenged, you know, the economy, the politics, my new job, my lack of a job, all those things, you know, a lot of people who are listening to the show, they are on their way to doing something elite. They see bigger and better things for themselves, and they own things. They're responsible for people and things in their lives, and many often. And I think this is the show for you. You know, we interview 1%ers to talk about those challenges and things they face and how we can be even better as we go through this journey of leadership and life and looking to be a success and making the best of ourselves we possibly can be. Carole, you are an absolute expert at, you know, improving, you know, yourself, driving it, getting better at this. Let's introduce you a little bit. Obviously, the CEO there of Relevant Insights, and then longtime executive coach, started out in the HR world in Colorado now, correct? Mm-hmm. And now born and raised where?
Texas.
Oh, really? Texas girl. Okay.
Yeah, Texas girl. In fact, my husband and I met on a blind date, and the only reason I go out with him is that he had graduated from the rival high school of us in football, and he was already on his way in the Air Force Academy. And I go, okay, now I can date you because we're not rivals anymore, technically.
Nice. What was those two rival schools?
Deer Park High School and LaPorte High School. We were huge rivals in all the sports that we did.
Yeah. So I love that. And so you meet this guy, hey, you know, fine, now we can go out. He's an academy guy. So, you know, academy people are serious. Just for anybody out there, like, it is no joke to get into one of our service academies here in the United States. If you're outside, if you're inside the States and you want this, listen, I recommend this to a ton of people. And I don't know if I've seen better facilities at a university than the Air Force Academy in the world, right? It's amazing.
Yeah, he played rugby. And when you visit these academy facilities, you just go, wow, this is impressive.
Yeah. Tax dollars at work. So it's pretty wild, right? And of course, listen, a lot of responsibility for these young men and women who are heading into our academies, and it is not easy for sure. But what most people probably recognize, may not know all the time, is that signing into academy is probably signing into a life of travel, adventure, journey. These are to be officers in our military and then on to greater and better things and learning and leading, but typically not in one place. Is that fair, Carole?
Very fair. We moved around. I typical military time. We stayed in for 26 years and moved on an average about every 3 years, which meant you got to reinvent yourself as the plus one often, and kids had to adapt. And we found sports to be the common thread. We could put them on a sports team and they could make friends faster than if they didn't have that as their the connector, I suppose. And so it was really advantageous to have kids who were happy to be in sports because that was a lifeline.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that's an interesting look at that. I never thought about that, but sports is a great common denominator, right? And, one of the things we've done with our 5 children is we've homeschooled our kids and we've moved a little bit. I was a pro baseball guy, right? So, we know that world of moving a little bit. And I probably never thought about the advantage of being in a very small couple hundred family, person, actually a couple hundred person, and then maybe how many 50, 60 family homeschool groups. It became very intimate. You got to know the families pretty well. You knew the kids your age because there was only typically 8 to 12 in a class. So, and every year was always a new start to that. And while there was definitely some consistency across the board, it was not uncommon to have new people come in. And it felt like probably a little easier to come in as one of 8 than one of 30 into a class, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will probably never win Parents of the Year. When I think at one point we've moved both our kids in the middle of high school when they had an established sports team and friends. And at one point we actually moved our son right after football season and before Thanksgiving. And nobody cares if you're new when you're not in the football stand. It's just crazy how we have these openings where we're open to new people. And after that, we're like, yeah, you're not new anymore. Even if you are.
Yeah. That's funny. It's weird, right? So now you study at George Mason, then you head to Colorado State to a little Greeley. That's going to be a little culture shock from Texas and the East Coast. You've seen all the coasts now, and now you're headed to the mountains and a master's, and you start down the road in HR, human performance, human engagement, how we do better in the workplace, all those things. And that was a real broad stroke, right? When you and I came out of university, HR was a lot of lanes, right? And now it's very different. Let's talk a little bit about that because, self-described, you love coaching up people and teams and engagement and development. And my view of HR is dealing with challenges and a lot of paperwork. Do you see that? I mean, that's my first thing that comes to mind.
It is what it has become now. I think we touched on this when we were just starting to chat earlier, is that when I started out in what is now HR, we didn't call it HR. I was training and development. I was hiring and onboarding. I was the office manager who also did these 5,000 other things. I had a gift for conflict negotiation. I had a gift for working things out between people who were unhappy. And now I find that it all now is under the big umbrella of human resources. And I got to the point, so in my college and master's, I studied industrial organizational psychology, which is the research and study of how to make people happier at work together.
Yeah.
Bottom line. And I found that I really liked working with the planning of where do we want to go? Where do we want to grow? Who do we need next? How are we going to attract them? How are you going to keep them here? How are you going to make the leaders be able to lead so that they're going to walk in here and they're going to love it? And that was strategic HR. Yeah. And now all of HR is a paper hungry little entity because of all the laws and all of the ways to have talent internationally and have taxes if you have different offices in different states. I mean, it's just a very interesting playground of paperwork. And for those who love paperwork, there is a place for you.
Yeah.
If you really like to work with people, you got to be really careful about where you step in or if you step into HR, because you don't get to work with people as much as we used to, at least in my experience. And I know that there's 1,000 versions of HR in a million different companies. So I hope that if you love working with people and you're in HR, you get to work with people.
Yeah, one of my spaces that I've kind of just seen in and this is my own self-study. I'll just say that no data to support this in any way, people. But, I've been through a lot of different companies. I find this one of the hardest area to retain people in itself. And I often find a very high volume of people to manage per employee. For example, I say, oh, you have 1,000 people working, like, hey, we have 3 HR people. And I'm like, wait a minute, like 3 people are managing 1,000 onboarding, payroll, like they're responsible for all those, 9, 10 lanes of human resources now. And there's 3 to do 1,000. I find it's underserved often. Do you find that same?
Yes. Simple. Yes. Human resources as an industry has really not gotten a lot of support and respect of all the things they're capable of doing. They really can be a brilliant strategic partner if you let them sit at the table. And a lot of people don't know how to do that because they think they're just taking care of all the paperwork and you get them in here and then we'll take care of them. But when we have a problem, we'll call you in without any context.
Yeah.
And you fix it. And it's an underutilized scope of talent that I think a lot of HR professionals are really trying to change. I find that when I coach leaders, one of my very first questions is, how well do you know your HR department? How well do you know who's running and keeping track of all the surveys, all the things that you want to collect as data as proof? How well do you know them? How well are you using them? Are they at the table with you? Have you had a conversation with them about how happy your people are outside of your domain? And it's 50-50. Some are really good. And those are the people who really have some really strong leadership foundations. And then there's people like, what? I'm supposed to talk to who?
I don't even know who runs that department. Like,
what?
Yeah,
We have one?
I know. It's bizarre. There is a broad spectrum how this works and how it becomes important. But I think from my SHRM friends, right, all out there, I mean, I feel like they have worked harder than most to move ahead and with a lot of responsibility and often not exactly feeling warm and fuzzy and encouraged in their work, right? And it's a hard job. It's a hard role.
It can be. It can be a joy. There are brilliant, bright spots, but there are some non-joyful parts of it. So there's a small company and they have an HR department of one. That person needs a lot of love and support and care to grow and understand. And I think what I find really intriguing is that people at the top forget to convey to the HR department what their strategy is, what their bottom line goals are, and includes HR in understanding how to meet all those bottom line goals. A business is in business to care about their bottom line. That's 100% what they care about, but they don't convey that they want every conversation to be tied to it. And a good HR person should be able to say, okay, if we need 3 more people, here's the salary that's going to be competitive. If we can pay the competitive salary and they do the work that we're hiring to do, this is how it's going to help our bottom line. If we can include that part of the conversation, they will get more visibility.
Yeah. Big itty right there. Big itty of visibility. And I think we lose that, right? I think there's a lot of organizations that lose that part of it. And then, I think we're going to jump into this next thing of a couple of things of expectations. I think expectations are awesome and dangerous. They are awesome for me when we're communicating those well, doing that, getting clarity around those things. And if left to our own devices, at no fault really of our own, it's that if you ask 5 people their expectations of how to grow the company, you typically get 5 different answers, right? Like, it's like, hey man, this is what I'm thinking. Where from my seat and from my vantage and from my viewpoint, this makes sense. And so everyone's going to come at that from their own experiences as well and their own training and education about that. And I think that's a challenge because some leaders, if you can't and don't communicate that, as you said, about where you're going and doing this together, bad things.
Yes. To your point about expectations or asking several people and getting several different answers, when you get several different answers, that is a huge flag of opportunity to sit down and say, are these expectations connected to one goal and we just have a different lens? Or are we really talking about 5 different conversations? Because if it is 5 different conversations, we're not going to get there very fast.
Yeah.
And there are really some interesting ways to have those conversations that actually create trust and transparency on executive teams that don't get utilized enough so that they're all walking out going, cool, we're all on the same page. We all have the same play card. We got it. We know the plays. I think we get caught in the day-to-day and we normalize dysfunction so that we don't see it, so that we think it's okay to have those 5 separate conversations. I'm real big on calling those on the carpet so that we can actually have commonality and expectations so that everybody who hears everybody talking all the way down are on the same page too.
Yeah, that's a big deal. All right, well, we're going to come back a little bit to that. But first thing, one of the things that most people don't know about you, Carole, that I got a kick out of is that you had a professional water skier career for at least like 5 minutes. And I am thrilled by hearing this because I have a couple good friends over in Milwaukee and they toured Europe on a professional skiing tour after college. They were both college level skiers
Amazing.
and a whole world of entertainment that I never knew existed actually. And they're both like fabulous. Even like now they're really good. One's the CEO of a company and he's still great. He's on his lake at, the 5:30 in the morning when it's glass and he
Yep.
can barefoot. He's amazing. And he's always like, drive the boat. I'm like, man, I'm scared. Like he's so good. I'm gonna kill him or something into a dock. So it's really impressive. Tell us a little bit about your blush of your water skiing professional career. Everyone thinks of Texas when they see professional water skiers, by the way.
Well,
Everyone
it's
thinks
because
Texas.
there's so many lakes, right? All the man-made lakes that we assume were real, and we're like, oh, they're not real. I grew up with a brilliant uncle who had a lake house. My dad was a big sailing kind of guy, and my uncle was the lake guy. And he was so good at getting up and making all the kids get up at 5 in the morning. So I learned how to water ski every summer, and I loved it. When I was a junior in high school, and I'm in track, and I'm cheerleading and band, and anything I could do to stay at school with all my friends, I did. Needed a job. And I had a group of friends that were all carpooling to Astro World, Houston, Texas.
Yeah.
And we like, woohoo, we're
Is
gonna
that next to
grow up
the
and have a
Astro
job.
Dome? Is that really like
Yes.
close? Yeah. Okay.
It's now a parking lot. Sadly,
Yeah.
it's no longer, but it was there. And I walked by on my way to running the bamboo shoot ride, which was brilliant because I could leverage how wet people got. Felt very on top of the mountain on that one. And I saw water skiing and I go, I know how to water ski. Let's do this. So I walked in and I said, I would like to be a part of the team. They said, brilliant. We don't have a whole lot of people who do that. And I trained in the world's smallest water ski pond that was ever built in history, apparently. And I was one night's sleep away from my big debut. You got the flat skis, you got the wave, pyramid practice, all that stuff. And I showed up to work, and our illustrious boat driver had decided to get high and drove the boat into the wrong side of the ramp. And there went the careers of all the water skiers, because the liability, the attorneys just blew a top, and they decided to turn it into a fireworks pond immediately following that, so they didn't get sued. And just like that, poof, like a firework, my lovely water skiing career went up.
That's classic. Well, darn it. We would have been having a whole nother conversation, right? If we weren't talking about this and conflict and a happier workplace and managing expectations, we'd be talking about, human pyramids on water.
Well, to your point, I do have friends who are brilliant water skiers still, and we get together, and I marvel at the technology in boats today.
Oh, yeah.
And
right.
How different a boat can be. If you want to wake surf, you've got to have a different ballast. If you want to water ski, you probably might just get a different boat. And he has all the toys. And so we still get out there and water ski, and he's still giving me tips and tricks. And it just makes you feel young again to get out and do the sports you did growing up.
Yeah, until you take a bad fall and then you go, what the hell was I thinking? Like, man, I'm not young anymore. I do that all the time. And I'm like, hey, let's wake surf. Let's go. And then I'm like, I'll take a hard fall, get hit with the board or something stupid. And I'll be like, I keep writing like checks my 53-year-old body can't cash, like I'm like, man, I'm not 22 anymore, but I love it. Still playing hockey, all that good stuff. So let's get into a little bit something, when we talk about the show, we talk about shows founded on a quote named after a show from a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution, where I read in it from Chris McChesney, winners, when shown data that they are losing, find a way to win. Mm-hmm. And, we run into these things as challenges in our life. Talk to me about, as a younger person, some of the challenge or one of the challenges you faced that you were like, man, I don't know if I really want to even try to manage this. It's frustrating, recovery, like whatever it is. Talk to me about one of those things that you face and how you manage through it.
It's a buffet to pick from.
Right. A smorgasbord of issues.
It's a smorgasbord. Yeah. I like, to your point, when people think people just show up and it's been an easy road, they have no idea the chapters in the book you have just, been reading. Yeah. And I did suffer in 3 different car accidents. I all stopped by turning left. I'm not scared of driving. I just don't like left turns. And, the first one I lost, some family members that were very pivotal in my life. When I was 17, I was an athlete and I had to relearn how to walk and function and, breathe, collapsed lungs, and just lots of
Wow.
injuries. And the last one, I was with my son. And I think while you can handle what you suffer very much easier than somebody listening could, it was when I needed to take care of my son's healing that woke me up to how to teach attitude,
Mm.
choice of what you do with what you're given, even when it sucks. And then, like many in life, as we continue to brilliantly stay here and age, I did get a very surprising hard cancer diagnosis. And while bad news sucks, just like bad data, when you get data, you're losing.
Yeah.
It's no different. That's data. And you have to figure out a way to win. You have to go, okay, how are we going to deal with this? And I'm that person who goes, okay, let's figure out what's going right. And they go, wait, you have cancer and you want to know what's going right? And I go, yes, I want to know exactly what's going right, because if you can concentrate on what's going right, then you know what to stay doing, and then you know where to grow. And so we have a choice of how we look at everything. How do we handle our mentality? What do we put in our bodies? What do we do with our bodies when it's trying to fight its hardest? And throughout each of those, I had a brilliant man who's a fellow speaker who asked me, who did you get to become in the best way because of each of those events in your life? And that is a great question.
Great question. Yeah.
Everybody, because you don't think about it. They go, oh, poor me. Oh, it's another one of those challenges overcome. Oh, how can I make this into a great story? I said, that's not the story. The story is who you got to become in a good way because of how you handled something that stunk.
Yeah.
And I looked back and got to say, oh, like, for instance, when I was 17, I was hit at a left turn intersection by a very overzealous fellow teenager who just got her braces off.
Mm.
She's just hurrying home and she sweeps around a truck and overcompensates and gets in my lane, and boom. I heard when I was in intensive care and the room's dark, I heard someone say, oh yeah, I heard the other driver just said that they never saw her. And I go, wow. I now know how literally painful it must be to feel invisible. And it just hit me to the core how hard it is if you feel invisible. And so after that, when it was a long recovery, but when I finally got back into school, I made it my mission that I was going to smile at everyone I saw, because on my watch, I wanted them to know that someone saw them that day.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things that came out of that among many, but that was a core mission for me.
Yeah. When I was talking to Nikki here, he was on my show, Canadian, real motivator. And, he said something really good about this. It's not happening to you, it's happening for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, man, hey, wait a minute. If it's happening for me, what's the benefit? What should I be taking from this? I mean, what a great takeaway, right? Of seeing wow, there are other people who actually feel invisible. Yeah. I became invisible in this moment. I mean, by the way, seeing this kind of thing with these left turns, I mean, I'm serious. I would map all my routes so they're right turns. I'm like, hey, we're just gonna go all the way. I would be like, I'm the only right turn guy. Heck with NASCAR, I'm right only. All right, I'm not doing
That's
any
right.
of it. So, it's crazy. Fortunately, NASCAR doesn't have to cross traffic. It doesn't have oncoming. But
nope.
It's so significant, and it's amazing that obviously we've all had friends that have been affected by an automobile accident, which is, by the way, extremely common. I often have to, because I've flown so much in my life, right? And I was definitely scared of it as a kid. I have to laugh when people tell me they're afraid of flying. And I'm like, you drove here today, right? There's so much more risk in that than oh my gosh, you've already surmounted the biggest risk of your life this morning by getting here. This is gonna be easy now. You don't even know. And so, talking people off that fear, and I get it, the heights, I do get the, the fear, but this is pretty, serious, a family member lost. Now as an adult on this third one, you actually have a child that's affected. And I really identify with that as, having a guy who, I went through 7 surgeries, the athlete, you're under the knife pretty regular, and you just get healed in accidents and broken leg and blah, blah, blah. And it's different when it happens to somebody you love and it happens to someone you care about, you've been helping, and it feels a little helpless. Hey, I can't help walk for you. I can't help you get in the right mindset for you. Walk me through a little bit of that challenge.
It's, when you've got he was in sports, baseball had just started, and he had such a bad concussion and had hit the interior of a part of the car so hard that we thought one leg was growing longer than the other. That's how off kilter his body was.
Wow.
And I had a friend who was sadly divorcing a chiropractor, but I figured she'd be a good person to call because she'd give me the straight skinny on who to go to. And this was back when the insurance wouldn't cover chiropractic care. I mean, this is, a little whiles back before they really understood holistic body care for just the average Joe Schmo. So we paid out of pocket for him and I both to go to a chiropractor. But he had to give up his baseball season because the baseball coach just wasn't really empathetic. He didn't really understand my son's injuries. We didn't understand how extensive his injuries were. And my husband was really disappointed because he loves baseball. And the other sport was soccer, which my husband had never played. So suddenly my husband was kind of grumpy that he'd had, and my poor son's stuck in the middle, right? So you're having to look at this like, okay, we can only control what we can control. How do I help him feel in control of something right now? And it was just, how can we be in control of how you think and how you feel and what you do and what you choose? Because you can only control what you can do. And it was just kind of helping the mindset of it's an attitude. We will come out of this. It's how we choose to respond that defines us and makes us better and makes us stronger. And we will find solutions all the time. So it just was a different way to think about it all because now I'm coaching, literally coaching my son in how to think about this while we're getting chiropractic care, which was very new and just a whole new ball game, so to speak, but without baseball. And that was a hard sacrifice. He never went back to baseball after that. I think it was kind of one of those doors that closed in his head and we just couldn't get it reopened. He still was an athlete. He played soccer and really enjoyed that. But it was just it's when you look back at those little moments.
Yeah, it's intriguing, right? And being a baseball guy and having 5 children and 4 boys, right? Like everyone's like, hey, all your kids are going to be baseball stars, right? I'm like, yeah, I don't care. Like, that's fine. Whatever they want to do, And they don't. They all play hockey. One of them plays a lot of baseball. But so it's interesting. Like, there's a lot more choices for kids now, and that's very different than when I was growing up. And so it's cool. And I'm a little bit excited and disappointed in the same idea that there are now more kids playing soccer in the United States than baseball. And I really get it. I mean, I think that, the first time, and we want to, set these kids up for, AAA level baseball when they're 7 years old. And I'm like, I just don't know why we're not playing T-ball till they're 14. Like, let them hit it a mile and have fun, and kids get hurt. Love that. And then they're like, I don't want to play anymore. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. Like kids are throwing hard and you got 100 pounds and 1.5 feet discrepancy between the kids. And it's gaga, right? And so they haven't navigated that development very well, I don't think. But, all learning. We're all learning. So let's kind of pivot to a little bit of your day-to-day, when you're really talking about organizations. It's funny because I love Patrick Lencioni's The 5 Cohesive Behaviors of a Team, right? Love that. And, I just find like it's hard to get teams to work together well. I mean, it is a real hard thing. And, I think one of the reasons Leadershipity exists is because most people didn't go to university for leadership, and now they got to run these organizations, right? And then the second thing is no one went for coaching either. And now you got to coach a bunch of people up on, hey, what does a team look like? And how do we come together? And how can I guide you to be a great contributor right in the role you're sitting in? And from an HR perspective, there's a lot of that happening. And it's perceived as they're not trying to help me. They're trying to tear me down and hurt my career. And it really feels negative when they talk to me. And it's woe is me. And I need a solemn meeting with HR because someone yelled at me and got mad at me for not living up to my potential. Right? And it's like, yeah, like, I mean, I could just imagine as a coach in the major leagues yelling at a guy and saying, this is what we expect from you. We want more from you. And, I'm here to come alongside and build you up to the best you can be. He's like, well, I'm taking my ball and going home. And I'm like, wait, what? So it's really hard waters to navigate. So tell me a little bit about, I really worked hard to learn how working happier together looks. Give me a synopsis of what you've learned.
Well, like you have said, when winners look at data that says they're losing, they find a way. And so one thing that I found brilliant was collecting data, using data. And I don't mean surveys. I mean, we've seen surveys upon surveys. If you don't know what they're going to do with the survey is meaningless half the time. What I'm talking about is assessments. And there's been some really brilliant strides in the social sciences of how to do 360s in a way that it feels very equitable, not critical.
Yeah.
There's one of the assessments that I like allows a leader to pick and choose their people in their 360, and they are getting assessed at how frequently they see a behavior, not their opinion of the behavior. And so frequency is a data point. Are they seeing enough of this? Are they seeing more of it than you think they are? Or are you thinking that you're showing more than they're seeing? And so that is a kind of a really cool, equitable data point that we're looking at frequency of experiences versus opinion. So then they'll take that data going, okay, I can work with that. I go, yes, we can. Mm-hmm. So when I am trying to get a team to be more cohesive, I like to work with a leader first to see where they are, what they want, where are they in understanding their team. But then when I do a team, a lot of times I'll do an assessment based on their individual talent, their individual strength. I have a saying that I repeat often. I said, nobody gets up any one day going, today's the day. I cannot wait to suck today.
Yeah.
I'm going to suck so bad. It's going to be brilliant. No, everybody gets up to be their best self. So if they're getting up to be their best self and that you're still talking at things at 90-degree angles, it's only because we don't know how to value what they're bringing to the table. It's just like when you put a team together, they have to get to know why they're each on the team. What talent is going to make them so special in this team that we need to support them so they can support us?
Yeah.
And so I like to use points of data that allow people to feel valued, to get to know who they are, to embrace what makes them unique, because a team is a lot of unique unicorns. We have a herd of unicorns. They've been told, you're special. And then yet they have to work on a team with other unicorns that have been told they're special. You are all special. It's your uniqueness that we need to value as part of the team and let you know exactly why you're here. So it's trying to get away from groupthink and yet let a group of individuals understand how to value the individuality for the group goals.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and I think like we've talked about a little bit, which is athletics is a great dichotomy of this, right?
It is.
If you have the players, everyone has a role on the team, yet the team goal is all unified, hopefully, right? In good ones. And you're moving in this direction. But, people's role inside that looks very different, on the daily sometimes too. That can change from day to day. It can be more important, your role on certain days than other days. And we call on that and tap on that player or that person to, hey, today you're a priority here in this. For us to be successful, we really need you and your role to really shine through. And that may be them managing other people inside that role. And so, yeah, I think it's always a great learning lesson of how sports become successful. And I think most people have an opportunity to be a part of a group. And even if they're not an athlete, because I think there's a lot of synergies in band, in certainly the orchestra, in acting, in drama club, in when you're doing math clubs and math competitions. I mean, yeah, there's an individual that does great, but like we are taking all the team's numbers, right? So as we improve at this, and we are putting people in certain areas, and we've all had to go listen and sit through our children. I don't know about all of us. Okay, for those of us who are parents, have sat through the junior high orchestra concert, right?
Gosh.
And wow. That is really, never have I applauded effort more, because we don't have a high quality finished product. And that's great. Like, understood, right? And it's imagining how hard it must be someone who has a degree in this, who studied music theology, right? And everything that's going there, and music theory. And now they're going, oh my gosh, I'm going to get all these sixth graders to come together and actually play something decent, right?
Yeah.
And not easy. And then you hear like, the Philharmonica, right? And you're like, oh my goodness, like, wow. when this comes together, like this is like a sound I've never heard before. And of course, you can't just be like, hey, I'm gonna be over here on, the baritone sax being whenever I want to play. Like, no. You just can't come in whenever you want to come in, right? This is very highly orchestrated movements as a team that makes it sound so good. And I don't always think that organizations understand how they fit into that, at least the individuals inside that organization.
Yeah, a lot of times I'll use the analogy of, when we go to a superheroes movie, the Avengers,
Yeah.
I said, there's no redundancy on a superhero team. I said, but there's no redundancy here either. So we need to understand what your superhero powers are and when they're needed, when they're called on. And the leader, their whole goal is to understand how to get them to be harmonious, like an orchestra, where they work so seamlessly together. They look like they are so cohesive and connected, but yet when you start to really look at it, you know which part they're playing and how easily they can change to that part to be more significant when it's needed. Step back, step in, step out, step to the side.
Yeah.
It's a dance of talent. And when I position it that way, it sounds all, s'mores and roses, whatever trips your trigger there. And I go, no, think about it. We are going to identify what your superhero power is on this team. And then you get to decide if that's where you really want to be. There is no redundancy on a superhero team. There's not any redundancy on any teams. And I have to kind of really push and let that sink in so they know I'm really serious. Because a leader has their talents too. They have to know when to step in and step back too.
Sure. Yeah, I love it. When you describe that, I think about a couple different things. So, the first one was a stadium where everyone holds up a color and you're like, hey, we're holding up a color. Isn't that cool? But the blimp up above the stadium's like, whoa, check it out. Like there's a picture that's being sold through the whole stadium. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. That's an amazing pattern or kind of montage of thing that's now looks incredible from 10,000 feet, right? And I also have a cousin who's an artist, and he made this beautiful picture, and people walk into my house, and it's actually a picture of Jesus, which is incredible. And so you see it across the room, you're like, oh, that's a really cool photo. And then when you walk up next to it, all the story of Jesus is little pictures of little stories of the Bible, like, them lifting the man out of the house to be, hey, he's got to see Jesus. We got to drop him down in so Jesus can see him. And, all these little things, the story of, being flipped onto the shore and from the whale. It's just, it's incredible how many little biblical stories. I think there's 32 stories tied into this photo. And so it's kind of that view from very far is very different when up close. And I love that idea of how do you get that? So when you're educating an individual when they're valued, that there's really no redundancy here, how do you do that best as a leader? Because that's not an easy thing when, hey, I'm one of 20 in the marketing department. I get that, right? But you're running social or you're running this or this campaign. Talk to me about that.
So to lead into that, what's really cool about educating leaders on how to do that, I get to tell them about the brain. And in neuroscience, they've revealed that the brain is always scanning the universe for just two things. Where do I fit and where do I grow next? Basically, what am I doing right and where can I learn next? And we're just scanning the universe all the time. I want to know what I'm doing right and where I can grow. That's why social media is so addictive. You'll scroll things you like, and then when you see something that interests you, you're like, ooh, how can I learn more? And you just continually do that. It does have its dark side because you go, I really want to be like that, and I don't think I can do that. And then you self criticize. That's the blessing and the burden side of that blessing. But as a leader, if you know that every single person in your organization, including you, is only wanting to know first, what am I doing right, so I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater when I go to a new training, and where can I grow next? As a leader, that's how you get to talk to people. Hey, here's what I see you really doing well. And here's how I see it when that's done well. And because you're doing that so well, I think this is a new area for you to grow. Those are energizing conversations. And when you can spot those things, a leader can talk like that, then if there is anything that needs correcting, that needs toning down, elevating up, person is going to hear you better because you've shown them what they're doing right. You've shown them that you know where they can grow, And oh, by the way, we can't talk about this to your, this other person because that's kind of against all the DEI initiatives we're doing. Oh, okay. So stop doing that, but keep doing this and learn here. That becomes an easy exchange conversation because you're letting them know what to replace it with when you tell them where they can grow. And I think we all get stuck wanting new information by asking the same old question. We have a very bad habit of saying, how can I improve? That is the wrong question. So anytime somebody asks you that, what they really are asking is, what am I doing right? And where can I grow next? They just don't know how to ask for that. They've never given themselves permission to ask for that, but that's what they really want to know. So when I get to work with leaders, I said, when anybody comes to you and says, oh, well, how can I improve? Here's what they really want to know. They're not broken or need fixing. So don't try to improve them. They're not a machine or a clock that's not ticking. It's just the only question they've been conditioned to use. Here's what they really want to know. So why it's up to the leader to change the conversation. And when they do, everybody goes, oh, they see me, they value me, I'm in it, they care. And that is what builds retention. People will stay for the relationship with their boss over everything else.
Interesting. And I think we see that all the time, right? Like we see people that they do not leave the organization. They're leaving a boss that doesn't make them feel valued, doesn't make them feel like they matter, isn't appreciative to what they're offering, doesn't coach them up. Like there's all these little things. And I think that's a really strong point. Let's get into the next thing, which automatically comes. Well, before we do, you have a couple, what's your favorite kind? I mean, there are great assessments now, right? There are great stuff. I love Enneagrams. I love it. I've enjoyed that. I love the 360. I like to call the 360 like a tough workout for people that I'm about to give a 360 to. This is like us going to the gym or going on a tough hike and we haven't been hiking, right? It's right after winter and you haven't been outside much. And all of a sudden we're going to go on a 7-8 miler. Guess what? The next day we're sore, right? Like, it's like, man, I'm a little sore, but hey, in a couple of days it's over, right? Like I'm a little sore, but like, I feel great. We went out and did something. We feel better about ourselves. And what a beautiful, view we took up in Colorado, Carole. And you feel better about what you do, but you hurt a little bit, right? And so I like to let people know, like, it might sting a little bit because people are going to actually be real honest about what they see. And because you don't see it the same, that's a little hurtful. And so I like to help people get prepared. That's kind of my way of, get prepared for what's about to happen here. So do you have a couple of favorite assessments that you think leaders like, hey, a couple that you just think are invaluable? Like, hey, if you're going to really know your people, you better get into this and help them know themselves.
That is an easy and difficult question to answer. So the academic answer would be every assessment has an agenda. What is the goal? So match the assessment to the goal. That being said, and I want to respect all assessments that have been created because they've been created for a specific point. No one assessment is a panacea. So the other answer is one of my favorites. I find that really good conversations need to start somewhere. And so I like to start with the full Clifton Strength Finders because the full Clifton Strength Finders taps into your top 10, but it also taps into your bottom 5 strengths. And they've researched, which is now over 9 decades in every country and every language, views the strengths as the way your hard drive is wired in your brain. Strengths are like real estate. So there's not a strength and a weakness. You have strengths, but each of those strengths has a dark side.
Yeah.
If you push it too much or you think that strength's going to work everywhere, that's where you're going to get some pushback and criticism. So I like to start that conversation because it allows them to see how unique they are because nobody's duplicated in that assessment. There's no two people. Even I've coached twins and it's been so cool to see where they are alike and where they are opposite because that's where the conflict is. But when we look at the least real estate strengths, that's where conflict is caused because somebody else has that as a top strength. They're using it. You don't appreciate it. So it just is a great conversation to start about how to value someone's individuality and understand their natural tendencies or natural gifts or natural superpowers. When I'm working with a leader who is leading a team and wants to really get a good photograph of where they stand, I like the leadership circle profile because it has captured the 18 leadership characteristics that are positive characteristics for leaders and the 11 reactive leadership characteristics that we get to talk about where they came from because they served you well earlier in your life when you had little less control. And now we have to shift you into the 18 characteristics of positive leadership. And it's that 360 that only assesses on frequency, not opinion. And I think that frequency gives energy to change. It has to challenge you or it won't change you. We know this.
Yeah.
And so I look at assessments that will help somebody appreciate who they are and challenge them at the same time. And there's a positive intelligence, there's a behavior intelligence. I like things that allow people to think differently by also understanding what to value about themselves and what they see as what they would like to challenge themselves in a new growth area. So Enneagram, there's many, many brilliant assessments. It's what is your point? Where are you willing to start? And what do you want to get out of it that makes me pick the ones that will work?
Awesome. Let's talk about a little bit, you touched on a little bit, what to do when things get hard. I mean, we have a choice in our way to get how we're going to take that information, and I think there's a lot of choice. Athletics is another good example of this. Like, hey, you're losing by 25 points at halftime of the basketball game. You have a choice like, hey, we can go up and give up the second half, or, we're going to do something differently and try some different things and continue to work hard and, show some pride and work better as a team. And, the choice is ours to make of how we respond to this data. And the data is not great, right? In fairness, like no one wants to be down 25 at half. And we get that, right? This isn't where I was hoping for this morning when I woke up. I was like, man, I hope the game goes well and we're down 25 at half, because what a great story it'll be when we come back. Like most people don't think that starting out their day. So talk to me a little bit about choice and conflict. What do you see in the conflict that could be different that I think we're maybe missing in today's world in our business and our work life?
I think we're missing the perspective first that blessings and burdens are buy one, get one. If you think it's a burden, there's a blessing in there. If you think it's a blessing, we need to look at the burden. And so when stuff gets hard, when the data is not going in the right direction, when your best talent just quit, when you've got a boss who is handling so much on the outside in a personal crisis that he can't bring or she can't bring her best self into the office, we have a choice of what we do in those moments. And I think we forget how much choice and power in choosing we actually have. We forget to give ourselves permission that we can choose every minute of every day how we see the light and the situation in front of us. So when I get the opportunity to talk about the power of choice, I get to remind people that they have it. It's like a super secret weapon they didn't know was sticking out of their back pocket every minute of every day.
Yeah.
And I go, what are you going to choose? And they'll go, I don't think here's what's happening. And here's what's happening. I said, And what are you going to choose? How are you going to look at it? How are you going to respond to it? What is the blessing? What is the burden? And just asking people to stop and think like that gives them grace to breathe and acknowledge it and go, I have a choice. Yeah, you do. You're not a victim. There are a lot of people who fall into victim habits. We get to remind them that no, being a victim is a choice. Are you choosing to be a victim? If you are, that's your choice. You don't have to.
It's good stuff, Carole. Give me one more thing before we go here. Do you have a quote? Do you have something that, like, when you've got that data you're facing and you're like, oh, this is not what I was going for here, like not what I wanted to hear, all these things. Is there something that you read or that you that can level you out in a hurry, something that you go back to that says, hey, this helps me make that choice or whatever it is?
I ask myself, what is going right? I'm not dead. It can start just there.
Great start. Great start.
Dead.
Woke up.
Not dead. Okay, not dead. Forgot. But when we ask ourselves that question, it is you can just feel the brain grind to stop and then look at things differently. But when we do, it creates those positive endorphins and it neutralizes how bad the thing we were originally looking at really is.
Yeah.
What is going right literally kind of helps right the ship, and it balances the emotions and it neutralizes the drama, because our brains are meant to look out for risk, look out for what's going wrong so we can fix it. There's a lot that is always going to go wrong. But if you don't stop and ask yourself what's going right, you can be way off kilter and not be able to come back from it if you don't try that. So that is my number one go-to question. What is going right?
Love it. And I've been through a couple of exercises that has had so much formidable impact on reviewing a hard situation, not reliving a hard situation, but reviewing that and looking back in a much later time, maybe, and seeing all the positive things of what did go right. And even some things that were much better in my life now because of that burden, looking at the blessing, right? Yeah. And by the way, if someone really puts their head down and really takes some time to think about that, I think they'll be shocked on how big that list gets, because there's a lot going right. And so I really appreciate that. As I was thinking about having you on the show, Carole, I know you're a choice person, and I really appreciate that. One of my favorite quotes is, there are two pains in life, pain of discipline and the pain of regret, and you choose. So, here's a choice, right? This is a hard way, and it's not going to be the easiest way, and it's something I should be doing right now, but I don't feel like it. And, you choose that. You can choose not to do the things that you're supposed to, that your roles and responsibilities entail. And when you get fired, you regret that, right? And you're like, oh, man, I regret not doing what I was supposed to be doing. But the pain of discipline is also pretty real. I mean, as athletes, we felt that heavily. And I don't ever recall going through hard workouts and looking back and saying, man, I'm so bummed that we won the state championships. You know how much hard work it was? I vomited one time when we were working out. I just don't remember that pain of that discipline. It was acute. It was very short term. So thinking about that today. But for Carole, thank you so much for being with us today on The Winners Find a Way. Tell them again real quick where they can find you.
Website, relevant-insight.com. LinkedIn, Carole with an E, Carole, Stizza, Stizza on LinkedIn. Instagram and Facebook is Relevant Insight Coaching.
Love it, Carole Stizza. Thank you so much for joining us on Winners Find a Way show every Friday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern, 12:30 p.m. Eastern, 9:30 a.m. Pacific. And you can join us on YouTube, LinkedIn Live, and you can find us on the podcast on all your major networks. We'll see you next time.
Rebellious Infusions are organic flavored water enhancers. Rebellious provides clean, focused energy in liquid packets. Just tear the corner of the packet and pour 16 ounces of water. Rebellious Infusions have no sugar, no calories, and up to 300 milligrams of antioxidants and loads of L-theanine for brain health. Rethink your drink at drinkrebellious.com. For 10% off of your next purchase, use the code 99999. Do you want to be our next guest? Or do you have inspiring stories to share? Or do you love to inspire, support, and empower thought leaders? Feel free to send Trent a direct message on Instagram or Facebook at Leadershipity.